Hello, Jenny Willie.
Hey, Jess.
How are you today?
I'm a bit confused.
What are you confused about?
I was like going through the Instagram of this girl I used to go to church with, and she was talking about how she wasn't eating pork anymore.
Really?
And and she said she wasn't eating pork anymore because it said in the Bible that she shouldn't be eating pork. And I'm confused because I thought that, well, Jewish people and Muslim people don't eat pork, that because we are free in Christ, we can eat whatever we want.
Mm.
So
And
I
where?
know, I know she's a smart person and she reads her Bible and she's been reading it for a while. So I'm just feeling a bit confused because it's conflicting with what the pastors say and what everyone else seems to be saying, um, that I know who are Christian.
Well, where are you getting that understanding from?
That we can eat pork.
Yes.
Well, I mean, every gathering I've ever gone to, there's like bacon for brunch or ham sandwiches or, just a big hunk of pig roast, even. And that's like amongst Christian people, it seems to be like the chosen food.
Mhm.
And I remember reading, it was Peter was in Acts, and um, that he had this vision. Can I read it to you? And it's very, very clear. The vision that he had says that
Yeah.
we can eat what we want. So it's Acts 10, can start from 9. The next day, as Cornelius's messengers were nearing the town, Peter went up on the flat roof to pray. It was about noon, and he was hungry, but while a meal was being prepared, he fell into a trance. He saw the sky open, and something like a large sheet was let down by its four corners, and in the sheet were all sorts of animals, reptiles, and birds. And then a voice said to him, "Get up, Peter, kill and eat them." "No, Lord," Peter declared, "I have never eaten anything that our Jewish laws have declared impure and unclean." But the voice spoke again and said, "Do not call something unclean if God has made it clean." The same vision was repeated 3 times. So it's obviously saying we're in Acts. So Jesus has been there. Jesus died on the cross. All of the Jewish laws, including everything in Leviticus 11, were nailed to the cross when Jesus died. So that means I'm free to eat bacon, except for this girl was saying that Jesus didn't actually abolish the law.
Well, if you keep reading in Acts 10, you come to understand, and specifically down towards Acts 10:28, it explains the meaning of Peter's vision to the reader. And
Okay. It just said it was about food and what he was eating. So are you telling me that, okay, I'll read it. Do you want me to read it? 28.
yes.
So Peter told them, "You know it's against our laws for a Jewish man to enter a Gentile home like this or to associate with you. But God has shown me that I should no longer think of anyone as impure or unclean. So I came without objection as soon as I was sent for. Now tell me why you sent for me." So it actually sounds like Peter is interpreting the vision that he just had. And it seems to be about Gentiles and not actually about
Yep,
food.
sure does, doesn't it?
So do you think then that means that Peter didn't go out for pepperoni pizza later that day?
I absolutely think that, as he told God that he's never eaten anything unclean, right? He's not just going to change his mind.
So do you think that means like people like Paul also didn't eat pig?
Yes, I absolutely think that. In in um, Leviticus 11 and Deuteronomy 14, we have the list of clean and unclean animals. And at the time of Paul writing his letters, the Bible that they had was that there was no New Testament at the time, so there was only one list of do's and don'ts. So when Paul was writing to the Colossians and the Galatians and the Ephesians, presumably all Gentiles, he was telling them to read their Bibles. And at that time, their Bible was the law and the prophets. And so I absolutely think that Paul and everybody else was not uh they only had one list of do's and don'ts that they could point people to. And it wasn't that, like, they didn't have the New Testament today that we have today that people could point to and say, see, this here has changed the Old Testament laws, and now we can do whatever we want.
But clearly in the New Testament, like you just brought up Colossians, and I feel like you're judging me for eating bacon. But if you go into Colossians 2:16, can I read you Colossians 2:16?
You absolutely can read me Colossians 2:16. I love Colossians 2:16.
So in my great translation, NIV translation, the subtitle is Freedom from Human Rules.
Mhm.
Freedom from human rules. Therefore, do not let anyone judge you by what you eat or drink, or with regard to a religious festival, a new moon celebration, or a Sabbath day. So this means that as a Christian, I don't have to do these things. That's what Colossians 2:16 means. That I can eat and drink what I want, and I don't have to do the feasts or Sabbath because I'm a Gentile, right?
Well, it may seem like it's saying that, but if you consider the greater context of what Paul was writing and who he was writing to, the city of Colossae was at one time a major hub of paganism in that part of the world. And by the time of Paul, it had become less so, but it was on a major trade route between the rest of the world. Like, people traveled all through there. It was a melting pot of different pagan practices. And Paul was writing to a presumably relatively small group of new believers, completely surrounded by paganism and wickedness. And he was telling them to read their Bibles, which, remember, was only the Old Testament at the time. And so they were reading about new moons and Sabbath days and feast days and what they're supposed to eat and not eat and drink and not drink. And they probably were. I mean, we don't have the letter that they wrote to Paul or any of the other letters that Paul wrote to them, but presumably they were asking Paul and lamenting the fact that they were reading all of these things, and the people all around them, and probably them before they became believers, they were probably doing the same things. And so Paul is actually telling them not to let anybody give you a hard time about what you eat or what you drink or when you're practicing the feast days or the new moons or the Sabbath days. And if you read in Colossians, the next verse, it says, these things are a shadow of things to come, but the essence is of Christ.
So what you seem to be saying is that it's taken completely backwards and upside down.
Yes,
You want to
absolutely.
read the study notes of this awesome Bible? What you eat or drink probably refers to the Jewish dietary laws. The festivals mentioned are Jewish holy days celebrated annually, monthly, new moon celebrations, and weekly, the Sabbath. These rituals distinguish the Jews from their pagan neighbors. Failure to observe them could easily be noticed by those who were keeping track of what others did. Some of the Jews held these practices over the heads of others. Don't allow yourself to be judged by the opinions of others because Christ has set you free to follow him. You don't have to follow human-made rules that try to tell you how to follow him. Christ himself has made it clear in his word.
NIV, man.
So this is the first Bible that I ever had. And, we were told that all the translations were good, but I think it's the study notes can kill you if you go and you read
Yeah.
that. I don't know at what point anybody's going to understand how funny we're trying to be, or if people are massively confused right now. But can we break character?
Yeah.
Because I wanted to talk about Mark 7:19.
Mhm.
And I think this is a very important one and something that I learned from you very early on. And actually, I was with a friend the other night who saw this by himself, and I was thrilled that he. Okay, so we'll go to Mark 7:19. I have a few Bibles here. I don't want that one. That's the only one I don't want right now. I'll go to Mark 7:19. I hope we didn't confuse people. Leave comments if we massively just confused you. I really tried hard to. I did it because Jesse's a horrible actor. Not that I was any better. What did I say? 7:19. So this is one of the other big verses that comes up when people talk about what we're talking about now. Okay, so we're at Mark 8, no, 7:18, should I? 7. Okay, I'll go from 17. Then Jesus went into a house to get away from the crowd, and his disciples asked him what he meant by the parable he had just used. Okay, so that was the parable of inner purity, right?
Yeah, there's nothing from without a man that entering into him can defile him. The things that come out of him are those that defile the man. That's what he said.
Brilliant, thank you. Don't you understand either? He asked. Can't you see that the food you put into your body can't defile you? Food doesn't go into your heart, but only passes through the stomach and then goes into the sewer. And then in brackets, it says, by saying this, he declared that every kind of food is acceptable in God's eyes. So again, you read your version of the NLT and you read that parentheses. So I was going through this with a friend the other day and he said, oh, wait a minute, why is it in brackets? And I said, dude, it's in brackets because they
Because
added it.
added it.
Added it. The translators just added it. Okay, now what do I have here? Ooh, I have a New King James Version. And I'm going to go into, okay, do you not perceive that whatever enters a man from outside cannot defile him because it does not enter his heart, but his stomach, and it is eliminated, thus purifying all foods? So there's a star. Let's see what the asterisk says. I didn't actually look at what the asterisk says. It says 7:8. Text omits the rest of this verse. No, I'm not sure where I am. 7:19. Text ends quotation with eliminated, setting off the final clause as Mark's comment that Jesus declared all foods clean. Does that make sense to you?
You see what they did there?
No, I don't.
They
I
said that it was
don't.
Mark's comment,
Oh.
and
Hmm.
they're saying that Mark is the one who put the parentheses there and said that all foods are clean. So if
Oh,
you
come
read
on.
that in another version,
That's a blatant lie because we have older versions that don't see that. That's
yeah,
so brutal. Okay, so I have two. I want to go back to the NIV because I'm certain they do something similar. In saying this, Jesus declared all foods clean. So that's in brackets again, in parentheses, which means obviously they added it. And I want to check out, because this is such an epic study Bible. Man, I could get lost in the well-written notes here.
yeah, there's a lot of notes in that one.
Well, it's a very, very thick Bible. And it sucks because I personally spent probably about $300 buying this Bible for people that I knew, because friends around me told me that it was an acceptable translation because we could understand it. And we couldn't understand the King James when we were new at reading the Bible. But the problem is, inadvertently, we learned stuff that was not real.
Yeah.
By reading the Bible, by reading the liner notes of your Bible, you're reading the man-made lies in the Bible, not conspiracy stuff. This is just the regular Bible you get off of the so as they this is the notes for 7:18 to 19, as they interpreted the dietary laws from Leviticus 11, which you mentioned before, the Jews believed that they could be clean before God because of what they refused to eat. Silly Jews.
Yeah, God didn't tell them that or anything.
Oh gosh. The actual Bible is blasphemous, these liner notes.
Yeah.
Because of they could be clean before God because of what they refused to eat, but they refused to eat it because they read the text that they had, which we have. It's still here. It's still in that part of the Bible. I don't know. Maybe this version just flat out deleted Leviticus 11. Jesus pointed out that sin begins in the attitudes and intentions of the inner person. Jesus did not degrade the law, but he paved the way for change, made clear in Acts 10 to 29. Oh, have mercy on
Which
us.
is what we just read.
When God removed the
Okay.
cultural restrictions regarding food, when God removed the cultural restrictions regarding food. So it wasn't even Jesus that abolished the law. God actually was like, psych.
Got him.
While being concerned about what we put into our bodies is a good, healthy practice, very few people are as stringent about what they put into their minds. I'm stringent of not putting this Bible translation into my mind. Through what they read, watch, or hear, Jesus was more concerned about mindsets as thought. Oh, that probably means actually that Jesus ate pork too, right?
Yeah, totally.
Because God was just like, dude, son, go forth, go to earth, eat the bacon. No, I actually am guilty, very, very, very guilty in my ignorance of to the very same person who I presented this Bible to. I literally had the words come out of my mouth, and I said, no, Jesus was like, I said something like, thou shalt eat bacon, or I said some stupid stuff because in my early days in church, I was literally surrounded by every potluck I went to. The meals were surrounded by pig. And like maybe it's just a cultural thing in the actual place that I live, but I actually genuinely believed, and I was a new Christian, and then it was being reinforced not only by the people going to church, but by the pastors. Like they really did, they actually did sermons about this. Okay, so one more now, because this is what, and then maybe you can give some context or explain what the deal is. So now I have what do you think is my final version that I have here?
It looks like a King Jimmy.
It's a King Jimmy, so we're not necessarily saying that this is the be all end all, but this is the oldest Bible that I have in this house. And when you go to 19, 7:19, because it entereth not into his heart, but go into the belly, and goeth out into the draught, purging all meats. There's no parentheses because he's not talking about having made
Yeah.
all foods clean.
Yeah, because they didn't feel the need to add it. The King James translators didn't feel the need to add to the text. And I think there's other places in certain translations where they do the same thing. They'll put like a parentheses. I mean, the Amplified Bible translation, that's the whole gimmick of the Amplified Bible is that it like explains the verse every time. So it'll have a verse and then in parentheses it'll say the meaning or their interpretation of the verse. And so the King James doesn't have any of that. And I think there's other translations that have less of it than other translations that have a lot of it. But there's obviously errors in the King James, but additional additions from the translators that don't appear in the text are not one of them. Like I think there's intentional mistranslations in the King James, but there's no added parentheses.
And you have the Geneva Bible, and I'm presuming it's the same thing in that. Did you check?
Yes.
There's no
Yes.
parentheses.
No,
So
there
those are the older Bibles. So presumably after some point, for some reason, they started.
yeah, I have no idea. I couldn't find out where it actually came from, but the American Standard Version, which was translated and published in 1901, has the parentheses that says that Jesus made all foods clean. But all of the versions that I checked before that didn't have it.
So could this potentially be like, we didn't talk about this, and maybe you don't have the answer. I'm just shooting from the hip here. Could this just be like if some council or something happened and they met and they decided from now on that they were going to start pushing this idea that
Yeah,
X,
it could. It
yeah.
definitely could be something like that.
One of the
Catholic
last
organization.
points that I wanted to, do you have anything else you want to say about that translation, about the fact the King James and the older Bibles?
No, I don't think so.
I wanted to go through two things actually. The idea of whatever, the idea of some animals never having been considered food.
Yeah.
So even the idea of like all animals being made clean, all foods being made clean, then can we talk about how, like my cat was just on my lap.
Mm-hmm.
Cats aren't food. Most people, aside from maybe certain types of restaurants, most people don't most people don't consider cats and dogs food. Most people who eat meat at least consider cows food. Consider I don't know, chickens food. Nobody considers beavers. Well, actually, maybe it's a bad example. I do know people who eat beavers, but like
Lizards and bugs and stuff. Most people don't
some
consider
people
them to
eat
be
bugs.
food.
Crickets. Crickets are very nutritious, and cockroaches have amazing milk. Where have you been? The milk from the cockroaches,
Ooh,
dog.
no, they can drink it.
They can drink it while we eat the steak.
Yeah.
Um,
So
yeah.
I think that's just it. Is like because there are some verses in the Bible that you could possibly make the argument that God is saying, like in Genesis, where it says that He's given you all things for food or something like that. But that comes after He tells Noah to put clean and unclean animals on the ark. So if Noah knew what animals he could eat and what animals he could not eat, an animal that you can't eat is not, he's not going to consider that to be food. So when God says, I've given you these things for food.
Do you by any chance know offhand? Sorry, we could have organized that before, but where it says, like, does it actually say put these clean animals on, or like these animals for food? Because my son actually did come across it in his, um, oh, I wish I knew where he put that, in his comic book Bible. And it
Oh, yeah,
said
the Action
so
Bible.
clearly. What was he telling us it said?
I can't remember.
But it was so clear to him. He totally, like, they actually did the whole thing justice, and it
Mm-hmm.
reinforced to him that, like, okay, these animals were for food and these animals were animals for something, because our Father didn't
Yeah.
arbitrarily create things. They were for something, but they weren't for food.
It's in Genesis 7 where God is telling Noah which animals to put on the ark. It says, of every clean beast thou shalt take of thee by sevens, the male and his female. So 7 pairs of clean animals, and of beasts that are not clean by 2, the male and his female. And also fowls of the air by sevens, the male and female, to keep seed alive on the face of all the earth. And then he goes on to describe the flood. And then in verse 8, of clean beasts and of beasts that are not clean, and of fowls and of everything that creepeth upon the earth, there went in 2 and 2 unto Noah into the ark, the male and the female, as God had commanded Noah. Um, there was a verse here somewhere, I thought, that where God told Noah to gather up food for him and the animals. I could be misremembering that. I don't want to spend too long looking for it.
Okay, if you can, I'm going to throw one last thing at you, because we said we would make a 10-minute video, and
Yeah.
I think it's been 10 minutes. One very important thing that hit me hard was, if there are no clean and unclean animals, then why, when we get to the very, very, very end of the book,
Yeah.
do we hear about unclean birds? So
That's a
maybe
great question.
we can show, well, the answer is because Jesus didn't actually abolish the law.
Yeah.
God, for that matter, did not abolish the law. Um, but it just begs the question: do you read your Bible?
Yeah.
Do you read the front? Do you read the back? And I do know that I have heard that people are discouraged from actually reading Revelation as well, because
Yeah.
it's complicated. Just
Yeah.
read John. Just read John.
Yeah. There's
That's
a lot.
Read John, and then read John again, and then read John again, and then maybe read little bits and pieces of some of the letters that Paul wrote, completely out of context,
Yeah.
so that when somebody tries to tell you that you're not supposed to be eating bacon, you can just, pull out one of those verses that we
Yeah.
pull out.
Yeah. You can pull out the same Acts 15 and Colossians 2:16 and Acts 10:9 and Mark 7:19 that we've heard 5 dozen times in the last
In every
month.
given week, in every given day, it's
Yeah.
and just to point this out without trying to be a jerk. There's no intention to be a jerk, but to call out hypocrisy and inconsistency and foolishness, really,
Yeah.
just foolishness, and being stiff necked and hard hearted, and
Yeah.
refusing to actually look at what is in the Bible, maybe not just going to the brackets, maybe reading the words around what the translators actually added. We're
Yeah.
talking about actually, like, forget about the study notes. We're talking about actually adding words into the Bible. Like, that's a legit sin.
Yeah.
It's
Big
actually a
time.
sin. Whoever put thus declaring all foods clean. I don't
That
care if the
person's
Lord
gonna,
knows your heart. You're in trouble, dog.
yeah, he's gonna have to answer for that. In Malachi, it says that God himself says, I do not change.
Amen.
And therefore, you sons of Jacob are not consumed, because he made a covenant with his people, which we have to become his people if we want him to be our God. That's what he says. And so he says, because I don't change, you are not consumed. So thankfully, because God hasn't changed his mind since he made the covenant with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and David and everybody else, we're still here.
Yeah.
So if and I think I'm not sure where it is, but I think that there's a verse, and I think it's in one of the prophets, where it says, these things will not pass away, or else Israel will cease from becoming a nation, or something to the effect of, like, if you can count the number of grains of sand on the seashore, then these things will cease to be. But he's making it obvious that they're still in play. And we've talked a number of times about all of the verses that say there shall be one law for the native born and for the stranger who wants to join himself to the Lord. And because that's another thing that a lot of people say. And even the Bible notes that you were reading a second ago, they make it seem like these things were just made up by some Jewish guy somewhere, instead of the actual words of God. Like, I don't know how you can read the Torah.
Writing, and we've seen it.
Yeah.
We've seen it. I saw it from day one, and people are so immersed in it that they don't even realize what they're being taught is the problem. They don't
Yeah.
realize that they're sneaking, they're sneaking dispensationalism, they're sneaking replacement theology, they're sneaking everything in under the radar, uh, and people are just too new just too new. I don't even want to say too naive, just too new, but yeah, too trusting, just
Yeah.
too
And
trusting.
then, yeah.
And
Yeah.
you see why people are church hurt. I mean, when I started going to church, I didn't understand, like, how could you be church hurt? Oh, I'm church hurt. I'm church hurt. Only after a few months. Imagine people who spend decades.
Yeah. Yeah. To unlearn all of that programming is got to be almost impossible for somebody that's been.
People do it. Pastors do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Pastors change their meeting day to Saturday. You
Yeah.
know, I can't remember the name of that guy, and I don't even remember where he is, somewhere in the States, where uh Ed, that Pastor Ed.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, so many people spend a lifetime. You also were, anyway, we're derailing, but
We usually always do.
we always do. Who
It's
knows? Who
okay.
knows how many people are still listening?
Yeah.
We should do like lives, because then lives gives you like a little. I used to do lives, and then you could see like there's like 45 people watching, then there's 9 people watching, and then 14 people. Oh, there's 3 people watching.
And that's our cue to get off now. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Jess.
Yeah. Thank you.
See you soon.